The ongoing war in Ukraine is something that has devastated thousands and thousands of families and lives, and we know that that's something that you all have heard about, but today it's something that we get to hear firsthand as we get to introduce you all to Pastor Ruslan, who is here in the States now, but had been pastoring in Ukraine for many years. And so excited to get to introduce everybody to you, Pastor Ruslan. Thank you for being here with us today. Tell us a little bit about you and where you're from and how you got into ministry and how you got here. Let's just start with, tell me a little bit about getting into ministry in Ukraine.
I first would like to say that I appreciate your church, and it's so welcoming and so warm-hearted, and I feel at home. Well, it took me a while to feel at home because, you know, I'm not used to being in a big churches, even though I grew up in a big church. But what I mean by big was about 700 or 800 people, and but your church is much bigger. So at first it was difficult for me, you know, when everybody's running around and you feel a little lonely. But then you get introduced to some people and you get to know some people, and you feel at home, and you're very friendly and loving people, and I appreciate your city, your church, and I got saved when I was 13 years of age with my brother. I have a twin brother who stayed in Ukraine, unfortunately, and so when we were 13, it was interesting that I didn't go to any church at that time. I didn't know about anything. I didn't know about the Bible or things. All I know, there was a neighbor. She was a Christian lady, and then we all thought that she was weird. All the kids made fun of her, you know, because she was weird to us. But at some day, I remember she came over to see my grandmom, and we were all outside playing some game or something, and she walked up to my grandmom and she said, "You are not following Jesus." And we all heard that. And at that point, something clicked. She walked away, but we looked at each other. There was me, my brother, and one more friend, and we looked at each other and we said, let's go and see what she has to say. We want to hear more. And we went there and knocked on her door. She came out. And we asked her, "Tell us please more about this Jesus you mentioned to our grandmom." And she started out saying something, but all I remember was that I felt the heavy burden on my shoulders, like I was a serial killer or something, that I was such a bad sinner, and I was dying, I was perishing. And out of that, I cried out to her, what do we do? And she said, "You've got to accept Jesus in your heart. He forgives you and loves you." And I said, "I don't know how to." And she helped me to pray, I remember, and there was something so deep in my heart happening. And when I finished praying, I felt like a burden was lifted up my shoulders, and light. I felt so light-hearted, like I could just take off and fly to heaven immediately. That was the feeling I had. And it was amazing that I had never prayed before. And the first response after that was to talk to my father. The God became my father. I come from a fatherless family. I never knew what it means to have a father, you know, and immediately I knew that God was my father at that point, and I could rely on Him, I could trust in Him, and that's how our journey started. And then the time went by, and when we got saved, we spent a lot of time with these people praying and things. And at one point, I want to tell you this specifically, I was introduced to the supernatural God, that He was not a God in the books, even to the point that I remember we got together to pray, and that lady, we called her spiritual mother. She said, after praying, we practiced praying and listening to God's voice, and she said, "You are going to go to India." At that time, I had no idea where it was. The only movies we had, old old movies about Indian movies, and I mean, we're talking about 1992. That was the time when I got saved. And the Soviet Union just collapsed at that time, and the Iron Curtain fell, and a lot of missionaries from America. So I believe your nation is a blessed nation, and even as bad as it is now, but God has a plan for your nation, because you bless the world with the gospel. That's how I think that the revival came through your nation and other countries also where Christianity was not persecuted. And years went by. I remember every time we came to pray with that lady, 1 year, 2 years went by after that, what she said. And she kept telling us, I pray for this, what I heard from God about you. I didn't believe a thing. You know what? I had no understanding or foundation to believe her. And then I remember I had a strong desire to learn English when I was 16. All of a sudden, I had this strong desire, something burning said, you got to learn English. I didn't know why. My father was the truck driver, and I thought, I'm going to be a truck driver. Why would I need English anywhere? But I had this strong desire. It was together with my brother. We had the same thing. We shared as twins the same desire. And I remember we bought a book, the English book or something to learn, to start learning. And at the time when I felt, no, I don't want it. I don't need it in life. And I wanted to put it away. It was something, voice in me was grieving. It's like a pain. I felt pain and like crying in me. No, don't do it. You keep doing it. And then when I started back again, learning and studying, I felt relief and joy about it. But there was no future. I could see no reason why. There was no. And then at one point, I got in the church. I was a home group leader, and the team from America came, and there was a pastor in America from that team from a church, and he came to my home group. I invited him. He would minister to the home group in the church, and we talked to him, and we said we want to be missionaries, maybe, or something. We didn't know anything about that, but we said we want to minister to people and be missionaries. And the pastor, he was the first. He was the man who demonstrated what a fatherhood is. He looked at us and he said, "What do you need for that?" And I said, "I don't know. We didn't know what we need for that." It was me and my brother. We worked together at some point for many years, walking the same path. And then the man said, "I'm gonna go home. I will send you the address of the mission, some kind of mission in Ukraine, and I will make sure you go there. There is a school there. They will teach you." And so he left. There was no emails back then. So we only corresponded by mail. And it took 2 weeks to get to one end and come back for another 2 weeks. So like 1 month to hear from something. And 2 weeks later, he sure enough, he sends the letter with the address and phone number of a mission, YWAM mission, the Youth with a Mission. And we wrote there, and interesting, they say, you've got to take a school and everything. And we didn't have money to go. At that time, they said, when we called there for a school, they said, you've got to pay $400 each for 3 months of training or something. And we didn't have that money. At that time, $800 was the cost of our apartment that we were living with. And we wrote him back, and he said, I'm gonna guys do something for you. I'm gonna help you. And 9 days before the school, we called him on the phone, and he said, you go, I'll make sure you are paid for. And we came to that school in the capital of Ukraine. It was there. So it was the first time. I was 21 with my brother. It was the first time we traveled anywhere outside of our little hometown. We got to the school, and it was interesting. They called it the introduction day at school. There was American director, YWAM, Jerry, his name was. And he came to do the introduction, orientation day, and he said, this year after you have this, the training, we plan an outreach. And he mentioned 3 countries. He said one will be Kazakhstan, the other Siberia, and the third one India. And it was 8 years since that lady prophesied and had the word of God about it. And we came up to him and we said, 8 years ago, we knew that we were going to go there. And when the 3 months were over, we went to the outreach to India, and we ministered to the children there, and it was amazing. And at that time I realized, God is so faithful. And over and over again, I saw His faithfulness and His love. Then the years went by, and we moved. I began to work with a missionary, American missionary. He was planting churches in Ukraine. And we felt led to move from our hometown in the eastern Ukraine to close to Kiev, to the central place, 60 maybe kilometers, 30 miles or 35 miles from the capital. And we ministered with him there, and then we felt that we wanted to start a church. I was married at that time, and we started a church, and from almost like 2 families. And our goal was to reach out to people on the streets, because I had a strong desire for evangelism. I wasn't really much interested in having people come from other churches and things. I wanted to see the lost saved in front of your eyes when they're born again in front of you. And we had an amazing privilege to see many of them in front of your eyes being born again from no Christian background, no church, nothing. They were zero knowledge about God. And now you see, when I watched that, there's nothing more to me meaningful and special than to watch someone lost in darkness and not evolve in Christianity. Sitting in a church for years to be born again, but to be like, he's one moment you're praying with him, an old dying and perishing man, and now you see the change after he prays. Even the eyes changed for these people. I watched one man, he was in prison, and he was it was unbelievable. Desires changed, the nature changed. The man who used to go out smoking every time we worked with him, he used to go out smoking every break, the lunch break or something, and he was very, you could see that he was not he was broken man. And then after he got saved, you watch him when nobody's looking. You watch him read the Bible and cry over it. That was. And I saw a lot of people like this, and when we started the church, that was our mission and the goal, to focus on saving and reaching the lost. And I also wanted to them, when we went out to the streets, I personally loved going out and being out in the streets. And I didn't even, it wasn't that we brought and read the Bible to people and said I love to go out to the busiest street in a city, stand there in a corner where people were walking by, and I would pray. We had a team that went with us from the church. We trained them how to talk to people, how to reach to them, and we wanted to bring them the touch of Jesus, not just words. And I will never forget a woman that was walking by, and she was almost running by, and I had a prayer, we printed some prayer booklets, and I just wanted them to touch with them, some like a touching point. And I would say, she was running by, and I said, please, this is a prayer, the Lord's Prayer and things, something common prayers that people knew from the Orthodox Church or something. And she said, I don't have time for this. And I said, maybe there is anything I could pray for you right now. Maybe you're hurting, your body's hurting, or maybe something is. And she just wanted me to get off her back, and she just said, all right, my feet are hurting. And I said, give me 20 seconds. I want to pray for your feet, that God would touch you. And I wasn't, interesting. Sometimes when you expected something, there was nothing. But when you didn't expect, and I remember I got on my knees and I touched her feet to pray, and I said a quick prayer, and then I got up, and she was running now. I mean, she was a moment ago she was gonna just say bye and go, but she stood there with the big eyes open, and I said, "What's going on?" She said, "I don't know what happened. The current of something went through my body now." And she was wobbling and shaking. Like she experienced, I knew she experienced, and she cried. The woman cried. She didn't expect the touch from, and we had so many encounters like this, and that's how we wanted to bring people in, and they loved the Word. We loved the Word. We had amazing the Bible studies in the church, and people were strong in the Word. And then the years went by, and it was not easy for us to do the church, because the people, when I look at you and people in your city, I see you're very open-hearted. A lot of people I met here, they're open-hearted, and they're receptive. Receptive. When you share something, the people may cry, and receptive. In Ukraine, you needed something so much work and efforts to make them, to somehow convince them to come to Jesus. And so we went out to the hospitals, ministering, and many times I went to the people dying of cancer and ministered to them in hospices and other places. And I want to specifically say thank you for my parents that are now members of your church. They're not my real parents, or biological. They're my spiritual parents, Joe and Winky. They came from New York 2 years ago, and they joined your church. And this is how I've been able to do the ministry, because of them. Because they've been helping us for years, and they have open heart, and they came over 16 times to Ukraine and stayed with us. And with Joe, we would go, every year he would come, we go to the hospitals to pray, to the streets, we ministered with him. And I want to say thank you specifically for their love and care. And so the years went by, and it was it was like 8 months ago, or even a year ago, something was happening, and we felt the atmosphere was changing, and the country was, something was going to happen. And when the war was declared, February 24, we woke up from the shelling and from the big blast, the shaking. I try to describe to people what it's like when your faith is put on a test. Especially when your life is at stake. You don't know how you will react, how you respond to this, what your reaction will be. And now you feel His God is real more than ever. And you wake up from this blast that they were shooting these missiles. And I try to describe to people what it's like. It's like the thunderstorm. You hear thunder, but when you hear thunder, you don't feel the earth shaking or the ground shaking. But this is something like thunderstorm with a ground shaking under you. The windows, the glass in the windows, the feeling shaking. Everything is, and you realize it's deadly, and it can kill you, and there is nowhere you can hide. And so that's how it started. And there was evacuation. A lot of people evacuated, and the church people, they evacuated. They got on buses. The borders were open, and people were invited to evacuate. And my children, I evacuated them. I made arrangements, and they left to Sweden, and they're now in Sweden. And so to make a long story short, when they left, I felt relief. But I stayed there because the Ukrainian borders were closed for man, so only women and children could evacuate and escape. And all the men were supposed to stay, and they were not allowed to leave the country. And we understand why, because they wanted us to throw into the battlefield, you know. And for me personally, you know, when people ask me why you didn't go to fight, you know, we all understand it's a political war. It's not you know. So I felt like I didn't want to have anything to do with that, and die for foolishness of some mistakes and political decisions. But I had to stay. I didn't know how to get out. And then I had a dream 3 months ago. I had an interesting, very vivid dream. My friend, his family, a year ago, they left to U.S. They came to America. And in that dream, I see him so vividly. I see him like a road. There was a road, and I am on one side of the road and he's on the other, and he's standing sideways to me talking to somebody, and I see him surprised, and I say, oh, his name is Anton, and I say, Anton, is that you? And I make a step toward him, and he's in the US, and I make a step toward him to shake his hand, and that was it. And I wake up and I felt something was gonna change. And then a friend of mine calls me a few days later, and he says that the U.S. government opened a program for Ukrainian people to be able to seek the refugee status, the parole, they call it the parole, and flee the war zone. And I said, I didn't know anything about that. And he said, I applied for that program. It's a legal program. It's all documented. And he gave me the link, and I gave this link to my parents, to Joe and Winky, who are in this church, and I asked them, maybe would you be willing to do this, to fill the papers? There are specific papers to fill on the behalf of a person you want to evacuate or help to escape. And they did. They agreed to do it. And then I received from the government, I received a special authorization. It's called travel authorization letter, that authorizes me and opens the door for me to come and seek the refugee and parole in the United States. But I still didn't know how to get out of my country, because that paper didn't mean I could get out, you know, my border, Ukrainian border. And interesting that my friend that introduced me to this, he had a ticket already lined up, the ticket for travel for airplane on August 25. And the only way possible was for us to go to a special exit point, evacuation point. A man could do it to escape through Russian territory. That was an interesting experience, and there were a lot of rumors, and there were a lot of situations. They were saying, "Oh, come on, you can't do it. People are getting killed there. They're shooting everybody who tries." And then I want to specifically say it because it was miraculous how God had a timing. He was leading in His timing, and I was delaying. I was trying to, you know, I was sitting in a house. And there was not much at that time. There was like relief from the war situation. There was the war switch moved to the east, and I was delaying. I was not really I was hesitant. And then the two brothers of this friend, they called me up and said, "Let's go, let's do it together." And I felt, okay, let's do it. The three of us, it will be easier for the three of us to do it. So we got train tickets, and we went down to that city in Ukraine where there was a convoy of evacuation buses where they make them, and we got registered. And the next morning, so we stayed there overnight, and there was a blast, 16 blasts we heard at night. That it was scary. And then I looked at the guys that I came with, and we rented a small apartment for one night, and that night there was 16 blasts that the rockets came, and I was shaking. I mean, I was spraying and shaking. I look at them, they were sleeping and snoring. And I figured, if they're sleeping and snoring, why am I worrying? And I went back to bed. So we woke up and we went to that exit point, and we got registered on a bus. And interesting, our bus came to the gate, and there was a police and military officers. They were checking the documents before they let you out to what they call occupied territory. And the policewoman called my name. I come up, I open she takes my passport, and the military officer next to her looks at her and says, "How old is he?" And she goes, "43, and he let him go. So I got on the bus, and two of my buddies, my friends, they came to the police and to the officer, and he said, "You're not going." And they didn't let him go, and they let me go. And I was here. I'm trying to get out with three of us, easier, but I'm alone on a bus there. And there were 15 people on the bus, and we went through. And I saw things I shouldn't have seen. I saw craters from the bombs and all that. And the bus, we were praying on the bus, and for people, I was praying for people to stay alive, because it was a demilitarized zone, that nobody's responsible. If something happens, nobody's going to take responsibility for that. And so eventually I got to a Russian occupied Ukrainian territory by Russians, but praise God, I had a favor of God. They checked my papers. 4 checkpoints we had with Russian soldiers, where there were stories that they would take everything from you, they shoot you, I had a favor of God. They asked me questions that it was so easy. And then I got to the Crimea part, and I took a bus from there, went to Georgia, through the border, and here I was free to go. And I was free to go. So September 13, I had plane tickets, and I came through JFK, and I ended up here. And here I am.
Thank you for sharing this incredible story with us. And I love that you take ministry with you wherever you go. One of the things that I loved hearing about is you talking about, I love to see, even in small acts that people don't think, we're out on the street doing ministry, and a small act like praying for somebody right there can change a life for forever. And Life Church is certainly a church that believes in the power of God that way. And one of the things that we do here at the church is we believe in small acts and how those things can make lasting impact. And we have a program here that we do every month called the Dollar Club, where we ask all of our people to sow into this ministry in faith, believing that God will do something big. And so this month, you are our Dollar Club recipient, and we have a surprise for you downstairs. And we're so excited, so honored that you're here with us. We love you. You are a part of us now, and God is going to do so many good things through you.
Thank you.
You ready to go see what we've got downstairs?
Yeah.
Let's go. I'm excited.